The FIFPRO World XI and Player of the Year were just announced, and I want to talk about it. One, because I like to honor greatness and talk about some really good players. This is one of the best times to do so. And two, because I feel like some deserving players were omitted, and some players who didn't deserve to be in the squad were included, and I think there are interesting reasons why. If you're unaware about the awards, the FIFPRO Awards are given out by players. They're voted upon by players, and I think it's one of the more prestigious honors you can win. I mean, being voted as the best player in the world or best at your position by your own peers is a huge honor. This season, the awards were given out based on performances from the end of the World Cup, so after the World Cup, no World Cup included, to the start of this season, which does include the summer, but the Nations League was the only real competition this summer, so it's not that relevant. With that being said, let's get into the team. As you can see, this is a very Man City heavy team. I think that's appropriate given that they won the treble. In goal, we have Thibaut Courtois. At the back, we have Ruben Dias, John Stones, and Kyle Walker. In midfield, Jude Bellingham, Bernardo Silva, and Kevin De Bruyne. And up top, we have Erling Haaland, Mpabbe, Vinicius, and Messi, who was voted on as the Player of the Year. I think you would nitpick a mistake or two in this team, but there's one thing that really jumps out at you. The World Player of the Year, the greatest player of all time, Lionel Messi. He should not be Player of the Year, and he should not even be in this 11. The World Cup is not a factor in this voting, and we have to look at his time at PSG, and that was a disappointment. They did not perform well in the Champions League at all, and he was even getting booed by the end of his time there. I do think that was disrespectful by the fans in Paris, but it tells you how his run at PSG went, and I'll be honest, I just don't value anything he did at Miami for this voting. And don't get me wrong, I understand why he's included. This was voted on by pros, by professionals, and I understand that the respect they must have for the greatest player of all time. Like, if you see him on a voting list, I don't think you can justify to yourself leaving off a guy who's probably still the best player in the world. But when we look at his performances over the allotted time period, I cannot justify having Messi in this team. When looking at fellow attackers, I can't include Messi over some stars like Victor Osimhen or Kvaratskhelia, who led Napoli to the Serie A title in some great seasons. Even somebody like Harry Kane, who had a quiet 30-goal season for Tottenham. It was largely ignored because Erling Haaland was breaking so many records, but that was more impressive than anything Messi did at PSG. And again, I understand Messi is the greatest player of all time, but that kind of means that awards like this mean nothing to him. He'd be named the Player of the Year for the upteenth time. I don't think he really cares, and I don't think he cares about having a spot in the World Pro 11. But for somebody else, it could cement him announcing himself to the world stage. And I think there is one real glaring omission from this team, and it's not a fellow attacker, it's somebody in midfield, Rodri. It is easier to justify having Rodri as the World Player of the Year than it is to exclude him from the World 11 altogether. I'll build his Player of the Year case right now. He won everything. He won the treble with Man City, he won the Nations League with Spain, he even scored the winner in the Champions League final. And he wasn't a passenger to those either. He was crucial to Man City. He was one of Spain's best players. And on his week-to-week performances, he was clearly the best defensive midfielder in the world. I'd go so far as to say he's the best defensive midfielder that Pep Guardiola has ever coached. And I get how big of a claim I'm making with that, and I believe it. I don't understand how you can leave Rodri out of this team. Even if you take away the trophies, the Champions League final winner, the Nations League performance with Spain, week to week this season, he was the best defensive midfielder in the world, and I think that this team takes a bit of a hit to its credibility by excluding him. That being said, I have one more mistake in the squad that I want to talk about that I feel can give us some insight into the decision-making process beyond the team. Thibaut Courtois was the goalkeeper named to the World Pro 11. Due to the time constraints of the award, his injury is not a factor, playing time is not a factor, other than him rage-quitting Belgium, I guess. I disagree with him being in this team due to the performance of another goalkeeper, one in Spain actually. Marc-Andre ter Stegen was La Liga's Player of the Year, not Goalkeeper of the Year. Well, he was Goalkeeper of the Year, Player of the Year, and it's easy to see why. Barcelona won the title because they conceded so little goals, and ter Stegen was a huge part of that. He was named the best goalkeeper in Spain, and yet Thibaut Courtois was included in the World Pro 11 over him. I'd also include Ederson over Courtois. He's not the shot stopper that Courtois is, but Ederson's ability with his feet was crucial to Man City's style of play. if they did not have Ederson in goal, they might not be able to dominate games in the fashion that they did. And it's not like Ederson's a terrible shot stopper, especially against Inter Milan in the Champions League final. He was making save after save. And he was even named the World Goalkeeper of the Year, so it's clearly not just me who thinks this. I think that it's hard to justify including Courtois as the Goalkeeper of the Year based off his performances of last season. But just like with Messi, I understand Courtois being in this team. This was voted upon by players, and if players look at the opposing goal, see that 6'7" monster in there, and all the saves that he makes, I fully believe that they think Courtois is the best goalkeeper in the world. And for being honest, if he comes back healthy at the same level he was before his injury, he still is the best goalkeeper in the world. He is world class and he's remarkable. It's easy to understand why the players picked him. I mean, let's look at the other guys. Marc-Andre ter Stegen, he didn't even start for Germany at the World Cup. How can he be the best goalkeeper in the world when he's not better than Neuer? Same with Ederson. He didn't start over Alisson. So from a player's perspective, I can understand having Courtois as the best goalkeeper in the world. But based off of last season's performances, which is what we're looking at exclusively, he should not have been included over Marc-Andre ter Stegen or over Ederson. With some of my complaints out of the way, I want to talk about the rest of the team because we still have to talk about and celebrate some really good players. First, in defense, we have Ruben Dias, John Stones, and Kyle Walker, and all Man City defense, but they won a treble. It's justifiable. For Ruben Dias, I think he might be the best center back in the world at this point in his career. Such an amazing talent when his arrival completely transformed Man City and I think sparked a new era of dominance for them. They've won the Premier League in every season he's been there. He's part of that treble-winning team. Great player, world class. Then we have Kyle Walker, amazing in the Champions League. He seems to only be getting better with age. His performances against Real Madrid and Vinicius especially were a huge standout of the entire competition. It's easy to see why he was included. And John Stones, I love John Stones as a player. I have a whole video talking about how crucial he was to Man City's success. His role as a hybrid center-back defensive midfielder is really fun to watch. Such a huge part of Man City turning their Premier League season around, huge in the Champions League final, and I feel good about John Stones being in the team, and I don't really have any complaints about the players who were selected for the defense. There are some players in defense who I think have an argument, the main one being Kim Min-jae, who had a remarkable season for Napoli last season. Him being excluded does feel a little bit harsh. Then you have some players like, Barcelona's defense. I mentioned how remarkable they were, and they have no representation at all. You don't have a left back in the team altogether. Maybe somebody like Alphonso Davies could have been included. Then you have guys like Di Lorenzo and Bastoni from Italy. And even in Man City, I mean, the three players I chose, you could justify having some other players in there. Nathan Ake was great last season, and I think you could make a case that he deserves to be in the team over Kyle Walker, though Kyle Walker's highs last season, especially against Real Madrid, were too crucial to ignore. Akanji certainly has a case as well. I think when you look at the defenders you selected, though, I feel good about the entire team. I think you'd argue that John Stones missed a decent amount of time, and, I mean, we're making this list based off 5 months of play. That means something. And maybe you'd have another player over Kyle Walker, but I feel good about having John Stones in this team, and about having Kyle Walker in this team, having Ruben Dias in this team. And sure, there are some other players who deserve it, but it's just a really good group of candidates. I would probably say that Kim has a very good case of being included, but sometimes there aren't wrong answers. There are just a decent amount of right answers, and I think that's the case for the defenders in this team. Moving on to the midfield, we have Jude Bellingham, Bernardo Silva, and Kevin De Bruyne. No complaints about anybody who was selected. Rodri should be included, but not at the expense of any of these players. If you want to keep the same formation, move Bernardo Silva further up the field. He can play anywhere. For these guys, though, Jude Bellingham, remarkable player, deserves to be here, and we're not even talking about his time at Real Madrid. We are ignoring this season where he's transformed into one of the world's best goal scorers. His time at Borussia Dortmund was so good that even if you ignore who he is now as a player who I feel like could be the best player in the world in the future, he deserves to be here. Remarkable for Dortmund, helped lead their title challenge, and if he doesn't get injured, they're probably able to win the Bundesliga. Remarkable player. On to the two Man City players. First, Bernardo Silva, another great player. His brace against Real Madrid was one of the standout moments of the season, but even forgetting that, such a special player. His technical ability is off the charts. He'd be in any team on the planet, and he can do that in a variety of positions. He played in midfield a lot of times in the Premier League. He played out on the right in the Champions League, and his versatility goes beyond that. I'm sure he played a false nine for them for a bit before Haaland arrived. He played at fullback a bit this season. And man, to have a technically gifted player with that much versatility, with that much work rate, is such a crucial part to Man City's success. When you watch Man City play, the drive that the players have, the culture in the squad is so crucial to them, and Bernardo Silva is a huge part of that. Then we have Kevin De Bruyne. As important as all the Man City players are, who I mentioned before, I think Kevin De Bruyne might come out on top. This season, he did have that brace against Arsenal, which was a huge part of the year. I think he was assisted on both those goals by Haaland, which is kind of appropriate because their connection was superb. De Bruyne found Haaland for just so many goals this season. He led the Premier League in assists again. Just a truly special player. We saw him recently with his return, how he completely flipped around that game against Newcastle. Amazing player. In terms of honorable mentions, Martin Odegaard had a very good season for Arsenal, but with how good Man City was, it's tough to include him over those guys. Then Luka Modric is always tough to exclude based off of how talented he is, but I'm fine with excluding him for this one. Then you have somebody like Gundogan, who was crucial to Man City's success. I think that Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Rodri, probably more important, so I'm okay with excluding him, but Gundogan was superb last season, and obviously Rodri deserves him to be in this team, but I already talked about him. Moving on to the attackers, first, Erling Haaland. Easiest pick in this entire team, just so many goals, just a machine of a player. Was finally the guy who got Man City over the hump, and he is a little bit one-dimensional in his play, but try to stop him. He's superb. Such an amazing player. Then you have Vinicius, and I feel like there were some other more prolific players, but with the talent that Vinicius has, with some of the moments he had in the Champions League and La Liga, I'm fine with him being in the team. Similar to when I was talking about the defense, I think you'd make the case for, let's say, some of the Napoli players, or even Harry Kane being in the team over him, but I don't feel bad about having Vinicius in the squad. He's such a talented player, and I think he does deserve to be here. Lastly, there's Kylian Mpabbe. He deserves to be here. And I'm starting to feel like he's being underrated by some fans. Like, there's a perception that he's just a direct goal scorer who relies on athleticism, and he is an amazing goal scorer, and he might be the best athlete in the sport, but he is so much more than that. His technical ability is spectacular, and his creativity can really shine in some moments. And he does need to leave France and leave PSG, and he probably should have by now, but his season in Ligue 1 was too remarkable to ignore. Such an amazing talent, and I do think he deserves to be in this World Pro 11. And he's one of the young players who I think is vying for the title of next best player in the world now that Messi has left Europe. But who do I think should have been the best player in the world this year? Who would I have given that award to? I think that the World Player of the Year should be a Man City player this season. This isn't like when Messi and just pick a year, there were a ton of them, didn't win the Champions League, or maybe Barcelona didn't win La Liga, but he was so clearly the best player in the world that you had to give it to him. I don't think that anybody had that year in the few months that we had in this classification for picking the best player of the year. So I think it should be a Man City player based off the treble and how well they played. So we have a few players to choose from. I don't think it will be a defender or a goalkeeper. You have to be kind of remarkable to win it as one of them. So I think it comes down to Haaland, Silva, De Bruyne, and I'd include Rodri in that list. I think that in terms of creators, I'd pick De Bruyne over Silva, and him and Haaland are probably ahead of Rodri, so I feel like it would come down to Haaland or De Bruyne, and honestly, this might be a personal bias, but I lean towards giving it to Kevin De Bruyne. He's just such a remarkable creator. I feel like he's the main driving force behind Man City's success. Yes, Haaland broke so many records in terms of goal scoring, but Kevin De Bruyne and his creativity was a huge part of that, and I feel like he's the player who defines Man City, and I'd give World's Best Player to Kevin De Bruyne for last season. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the FIFA World Pro 11. I think that Messi should not have been in the team, but I understand the respect that he has earned, so I understand him being included in the squad. Thibaut Courtois probably shouldn't have been the goalkeeper, but again, he is remarkable as a player. And I do think it is fun to look at these awards and to celebrate some of the amazing talents, and think that Kevin De Bruyne was the best player in the world last season. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. See ya.